Hi everyone, I hope you're having a great week. This week we are moving into week 4, so we're getting to the halfway point. We're going to have the same work that we do in the previous weeks. We have a discussion board and an assignment. This week our discussion board is looking at firms in healthcare, and we're going to see what features represent perfectly competitive structures and what firm aspects go into other market structures. These other ones, monopolistically competitive, oligopoly, and monopoly. They are not price takers, they are price makers. So they make their own prices. And so we're going to see which ones, where they fall. And then we're going to decide where we think in general they fall. You can choose either side. There's not, a specific right or wrong answer. There's certain firms that are going to perform more like a perfectly competitive market than others. We see big pharmacy as really falling in that oligopoly market. Outside of that, there are a lot of differences. You can pick where you work, you can pick where you want to work, you can pick an insurance company, a hospital, a clinic, a specialized medicine facility, whatever interests you in healthcare, and then post a follow-up post as well. Remember that in perfectly competitive firms, we talked about this last week, there are many buyers and sellers. The goods offered are largely the same. This happens a lot at a primary care facility because really they're offering similar services. Firms can freely enter, exit the market. Are the prices considered to be price taking? Perhaps, because we consider insurance companies and Medicare, Medicaid, what they're willing to pay for things do really fall under that perfectly competitive structure. So I hope that helps you to see kind of where they fall under perfect competition. There's price searching, which means they kind of can create their own price to a certain level. If you create it too high, people would not shop there. Let's go through all three of these to get an idea. A monopolistically competitive firm, restaurants, hair salons. You can also probably consider your primary care doctor here because there's lots of those. Some of them try to differentiate with marketing and stuff, being specialized in certain areas, but in general your primary care is going to fall under perfectly competitive to monopolistically competitive. Oligopolies, we think of car manufacturers and airlines. For the healthcare industry, you think of big pharmacy, few companies, each one owns a large market share. Monopolies are our final structure. Electric and water utilities are always monopolies. You can also think of small town. Even a clinic can be, a monopoly if there's no other competition within a long period, a number of miles. So as smaller towns get smaller, you see more monopolies in healthcare in smaller towns. Here is an initial post that worked really well. They talk about big farm. They also talk about different hospitals. I'm going to let you go back to that PowerPoint presentation and read this if you want to kind of get some ideas. This is, like I always say every week, this is not a perfection post, but this is one that really hits the mark. It talks about different structures of the markets, like barriers to entry, something you want to think about when you're determining market structure. They kind of go into that. They also talk about multiple of the different market structures. So I feel like they did a good job here. Reminder, use 2 sources and then post on 2 different days. I recommend you post by Wednesday because it's easier to have others to respond, but as long as you can get in there 2 days during the week, you won't get any docs. So even Saturday, Sunday works well. Now we are going to look, this is an assignment that I really want you to focus on. We're going to look at business failure versus market failure. And our assignment, I don't know that I wrote the instructions out on here this week. Basically, we are going to look at market failure. this week. And what sometimes students in this assignment, they choose to look at a business failure. And we already covered that, previously in this class. We looked at a business that failed. Now we're looking at a market that's failed. So this is something I've received before. They're talking about Toys R Us closing. That is not market failure. That is business failure. So this is a no. This is something I do not want to see you presenting on for this week in your PowerPoint presentation. You're going to want to talk about market failure instead. So this is an example of a do not. So let's go in the next one. This is Theranos. They failed. They were a startup meant to bring different diagnostics into just an area of consumer retail operations. Once again, a business failure, not a market failure. So this is another no, don't do this. So now I'm going to tell you what you should talk about in this presentation. Market failure. Companies that use BPA, the company benefits because the chemical used aids in the production of different products. So this is an evidence of market failure. This is where they're using there's a negative externality associated with this. And so this would be an example of one you could use for your presentation. Greenhouse gas emissions are also, another thing you could talk about in terms of market failure. We are overproducing greenhouse gases. This is a consequence of producing. Sometimes when you're producing stuff, you have to create some sort of pollution, and that's a negative externality. The carbon emitting activities are all going to work for this assignment. So that's an example of market failure. Let me go into a few. We talked about BPA and, some pollution. We could talk about how this could be resolved by taxation, any of that pollution, so that we can offset some of the costs to not use some of those chemicals or to change out some equipment. You can also consider loud music or loud noises from a facility that's producing congestion from traffic, gives you air pollution, things like that. Those are all negative externalities that you could look at for this assignment. Positive externalities, I know they're not really discussed very much in this particular assignment, but you could also think of positive externalities like watching your neighbor's firework display, adding flowers to your yard. You'll create curb appeal, increase the value of your home. Law enforcement is also a positive externality. These can lead to free riding, which is people that do not pay for them yet utilize them. So these are all considerations, things to think about in this project. You can also submit that presentation for up to 7 days late. I hope you have a great week.